Hello, everybody. My name is Dari, and I'm with the JVN project. We are excited to be partnering with the Madison Arts Commission for Winter is Alive, a multidisciplinary event fusing art and spectacle to re-envision climate change and activate global relationships. The JVN project is a collective centering on using the culture of hip hop as a tool for empowerment. We're an organization instituted and run by students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, inspired by the life and work of 19-year-old Chicagoan and UW-Madison student John Vietnam Nguyen. JVNP uses the core values of hip hop as a framework for developing our programs and initiatives. These include a commitment to literacy, uplifting communities through arts, youth mentorship, social justice initiatives, and the provision of platforms for others to share their story. We'd like to invite the virtual stage some amazing artists to share their work with us. Today we have Micah Daniels, a current freshman at the University of Illinois Chicago. She has spent her life loving and writing poetry that centers her experience as a Black woman and often her relationship with spirituality. She hopes her poems will speak and uplift those that relate to her. We also have Jesus Gouveia. Jesus is a graduate of Oak Park and River Forest High Schools spoken word program, where he is a member of the Louder Than a Bomb slam team. His poem "Bruh" was published in Poetry Magazine in February 2020, and he is now a sophomore at Columbia College Chicago. We also have Kyla Perales. Kyla is a Puerto Rican poet from Oak Park. She has performed at Pitchfork Music Festival, the Poetry Foundation, and the Navy Pier for the Chicago Lighthouse. She was part of the Young Chicago Authors Summer Apprenticeship Bomb Squad in 2019 and 2020. She has been awarded Scholastic Silver and Gold Keys for her poetry. Her writing explores the juxtaposition of youth, Puerto Rican culture, and womanhood. She plans to continue the exploration and help other Latinx youth connect with art and culture. Last but not least, we have Niall Lonsano. Niall is a poet, journalist, and teaching artist from the South Side of Chicago. He has received the 2020 George B. Hill Poetry Prize and the 2018 Gwendolyn Brooks Open Mic Award. His work has been published in American Gun, a poem by 100 Chicagoans, and The Breakbeat Poets, the new American poetry in the age of hip hop. Resisting Arrest, Poems to Stretch to the Sky, and Elsewhere. He has performed across the country, including Brave New Voices, Lollapalooza, and the very own JVN Day Festival. He is currently a senior at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a first-wave scholar, double majoring in journalism and creative writing. He's a founding member and coach with the award-winning Rebirth Poetry Ensemble, and he's a proud uncle and the oldest of 4 Black boys. Without further ado, I would like to now present the performances. Here they are.
According to the law of conservation, matter is neither created nor destroyed. You and I have been here since the beginning, in bits and pieces and in different states. At one point, I was the water vacuumed into the mouths of prehistoric sharks, and you were the absorbed energy of a violet. In this life, all the bits of me have come together to form a body that science says will begin dying after the age of 25. But I am scared I am dying now. Scared of dying in this form, but also all of the forms I have once been and could be again. Scared of gaseous corporate poisoning and air the flavor of waste and rot. Why would I say that I am not the earth when I've been every single bit of it? We should all feel the hand around our necks, squeezing tighter with every second, squeezing until our breath has turned bloody and sharp, cutting our throats as it struggles to be released, using the other hand to force plastic bags into our mouths, trapping any air that made it past the throat. The hands are our own. We're killing ourselves. Thank you.
In Darien, where the billboards leer over gawking clouds as you pass below them, lived my aunt. Or more so, lived the tree that harbored at the center of her front yard, branches hoisting emerald flags of surrender at the sight of whispering autumn, periodical cicadas clinging to its breast, belting notes in a glass guzzling pitch. My sisters and I would slip through blades of grass, hoping to avoid their slumber-stained eyes. My aunt would tell us that they would emerge from the ground every 17 years, each year labeled as a brood. This year, millions of them will rent their lives to the surface air. How fortunate they are to be born in a year of dying. Can they taste the blood as they awake? The way it quenches the soil with a thirst long overdue, climbing over the bodies that taste the asphalt. Do they know that these bodies have mothers, that these bodies will not molt from their coffins in the dead summer wind? Instead, they will stay below ground, consulting the bellies of grubs. This year, the cicadas will wake to crowing of sun-eating smoke and flame, singing a requiem in unison, wondering what happened to the home that their parents knew underneath that tree in Darien.
She wanted to become a botanist, but was seduced by her professor. Experimentation on the female body, just another body to be hidden in the bushes. He poisoned her into what all others would call a monster. Men trample the ground and yet wonder why only weeds grow beneath their feet. And when sea levels rise, watch them hand a bucket to women. They have always expected us to make room, carve a canyon for their egos. And one day, perhaps my daughter will have the strange wish of wanting a world with enough oxygen to make her voice heard. What is nature's daughter's business, if not to bruise the men who wish to uproot her? What if we took fists clenched in soil and laid ourselves bare across the land, bury all who mistook our lush figures for something they could harvest? They'll say we're eco-terrorists. But who is the one burning the rainforest to ash, letting their trash collect in the ocean till it's the size of a state? Men are willing the planet into a submission that is unnatural. And I know what birthed us will kill us before reclaiming what is hers, but I'm not afraid. You should be. Because when you're in a bed of her dirt, it'll be vines growing over your grave.
Reserve, Louisiana, also known as Cancer Alley, pride of chemical plant preschoolers who memorize grief like their address. Surrounded by silent serpents, poison pastures clutter the landscape. Gardens blooming gory tales, petals swaying in toxic wind, leaves nurtured by venom. Home could slice the nappiness off your head without any razor-sharp devices. Can't play house hunters when disease at every corner within a reasonable price range. You was born losing battles you had no choice to fight in. Under Bush, you was underwater, trudging through terror and sidewalk pools. Under Trump, you've been masked up, outside, got more ammo than ever to bury you in a blink. Refusing to sing the praises of a country that lets pallbearers grow nauseous of hauling homies beneath soil. For inhaling air only more sinister because the zip code reads melanin. Snyder auditions for Grim Reaper. Babies dare to play drink or despair. Pipelines deemed perfect site for pollution and parasites. Dizzying arrays of decimation scatter families like a fireworks display. You're dying for a day where the burden to call for change ain't on the beheaded. Somehow, you and I choose petition before battalion, fiery forum speech before blazing streets, communion before collateral damage. Fresh breath kept sacred for the fair-skinned, the rest left to evade extinction as long as they can. If this nation under God, why this nation never made us a halo?
Wow. Please give it up for all of our performers. A round of applause, the snaps, any noise would be greatly appreciated. Also take a collective breath to process all of that was said. Wow. Just wow, truly amazingness. Next up, I would like to bring on the rest of the JVN team to introduce themselves, and we will be hosting a Q&A with all of our artists that performed. So,
what's up, everybody? My name is Jax. I'm the producer here at the JVN project. I'm a poet and a dancer and a first wave scholar at UW-Madison. I'm super excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ella. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a sophomore here at UW and a first wave scholar, and I work in the youth programming division of the JVN project.
What's good, everybody? My name is Karina Robinson. I am a sophomore at UW-Madison, also a first wave scholar, and I work in the media and marketing team as well as the MC team of the JVN project.
thank you all for introducing yourselves. Next up, we'll be bringing on the rest of the artists, and we'll be hosting a little Q&A. Hello, everyone. Another thank you all for performing really powerful words. The first question, just off the bat, what was the leading inspiration for your pieces, and how do you try to bring in the connection to environmental justice? Anyone can start.
I can start. So specifically for this piece, I watched a lot of YouTube videos and read a lot of articles because I feel like environmental racism is something, like I said, I call it a silent serpent. I think it's something that like we don't talk about enough, but that is like harmful every day, all the time. And the people who environmental racism affects the most do not have a say. Like they're not in these rooms that makes these decisions about how policies are made. They're not in the rooms that makes these decisions that affect their communities like severely and disproportionately. And so I was like looking at all that and researching, and then I found this one video of this Black man. His name is Robert Taylor, and he lives in Reserve, Louisiana, which is known as Cancer Alley. And just like hearing him and like listening to his story was hella, like, it was powerful, but it was also just heartbreaking. Like, he's lost so many family members to cancer just because of where they live and them being Black and how pollution, and like they live around all these chemical plants that were just put in their community, and they protested. There's an organization called We Act that has protested against it, but these plants were still there. And he was talking about how like he doesn't want his grandkids to grow up in poison. And just that as a thought was really heavy on me. And I was thinking about that a lot as I wrote the piece. And, you know, I think with my work, I've been trying to I want to bring joy into everything, because I think what's powerful is how like despite this terror, we are like so triumphant in how we organize, and we're triumphant in how we resist, and we're triumphant in how we hold each other up during these like treacherous times. And so I wanted to bring that spirit into the poem as well.
For sure. Yeah, I really appreciate that thought process too. Micah, how about you? Can you tell us the process behind your piece?
Yeah, for sure. So I am actually a neuroscience major in school. And before that, I went to U of I. So I go to UIC now, but I was a bio major at U of I. And basically the only thing, well, I really like biology, but like the first thing that a biology professor would tell you is like, we're the only living science, because it's like chemistry is not living, physics is not living. It's like you're studying dead things, things that aren't really alive. And once I heard that, I just think that I really took that to heart, because it's like it really is the only living science. And it's just so crazy how just like everything is living and just works to come together. And so also like with chemistry, I had to take two. We have like always like these foundational lessons in the beginning, and it's like one of the first things you learn is like the law of conservation, which is like matter is neither created nor destroyed. And so it was just a really interesting idea to me about like sometimes if I feel disconnected from nature or disconnected from the environment or just earth in general, like who am I to feel disconnected from the earth when I feel like maybe I'm a human being and human beings are separate from the earth, but really it's like not really. Like all the parts of me, I feel like they came into existence when I was born, but really that's not true, because I have existed in all these different kinds of states and everybody else has existed in all these different kinds of states. And that's just like such a crazy idea to even think about. Because it's like no matter what you think, like the essence of you and just like every chemical, I don't know, like formation that happened, all of the ingredients that created human beings and anything else, even if it's human made, it's like it came from matter that already existed, that the earth created. And I just think that's just really cool. So I am, and everyone else is super connected to the earth, and I just try to kind of explain that in my poem, and also just remind everyone or whoever hears my poem, like we have a responsibility to take care of it. And although I feel like we shouldn't have to think that we're part of it to take care of it, because we should be able to care for things that don't have to do with us, but still it's like people are more inclined to care for things when they feel like it's going to like directly affect them. And the thing is that it is directly affecting people like Nile, like you said, like environmental racism, like that is just absolutely true. And a lot of people just don't see that. Even people who are living in those environments, unless they're educated about it, aren't really fully going to understand. So I just think it's really important that we are constantly reminded about our connection with the earth and do what it takes to care for it.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a brilliant articulation of matter and space, and really, I think like why we're like in this project together here at this event today, right? Is because like we're all in it. You know what I'm saying? Like when ish goes down, it's all coming down. And so I would love to pivot to you, Jesus, and this beautiful lyrical understanding that you bring into the space with this sort of like narrative arc of cicadas in their lifetime. I would love to hear the inspiration and thought process behind your work.
Yeah, so I wrote this maybe a few months back, but I got the year wrong. Uh, it's actually this year, 2021, where these cicadas, Brood X, are going to come out after being underground for 17 years. So I thought, 17 years might not seem like a big expanse of time, but looking at how much the Earth has detrimentally changed between that period, it's significantly worse than it was 17 years ago, for sure. And I thought, what being besides like creatures or bugs would understand that more than cicadas, obviously, because they've just been out of not been in like the groove of things and just been, doing their own thing. And I was thinking about what would be their perspective on things would be to come out in a year, especially now when we're such in a very like significant year. There's disease around, which honestly is a side effect of the Earth getting to the state that it is. So I wanted to take that narrative and see where I could go with it. What is this perspective that these cicadas are going to take, and what they're going to see when it comes to this 17-year span? What can I and like use and incorporate within the environment and these environmental changes that could be brought out? So I think having this kind of narrative, to it, kind of pulls on people's heartstrings more, because if like people around our age or people who are old enough to have experienced the cicadas between 17 years ago and now understand that kind of notion of them being there and how they are now, and seeing how their habitats and environments are being destroyed. Um, I was also thinking about this time of the wildfires on the West Coast, and how, imagine if the cicadas were to emerge and, you know, the everything's on fire. So that's one thing that I was really thinking about. And a lot of these discrepancies within our society, like a lot of people don't know, it falls back down to environmental injustice. Um, I think I saw a graph where on the south side of Chicago, they have more lead in their water, in their sinks, than in other areas in Illinois, and it's there, and people don't see it. And that could lead to other things. That leads to poor development, child development. That's just detrimental stuff that people don't tackle, and that could easily be dealt with. It's just you needing to work around infrastructure. So not only is it just because of the pandemic, this is a year of dying. Every year is a year of dying. I just needed to bring it more attention to it now, where people have a focus on something that's actually happening and affecting everyone else. So that was the idea behind that. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciated your poem, because I think like when we think about climate change, we always think about it in like a grand sweeping way. And I just like that you brought out this sort of specific moment. I thought that was really good. Um, Kyla, I'd love to turn to you and have you talk about your phenomenal piece.
Thank you. It started with seeing a video on Poison Ivy, the DC villain, and sort of looking into why is Poison Ivy considered a villain? What is behind this? Because her motives are actually that they're actually pure. She just thinks that humanity is not accepting the earth, not taking care of it the way they should. And so if humanity isn't going to do it, she's going to end humanity. And also, if you look at her life before being turned into Poison Ivy, she was taken advantage of by her professor, and that's how she gained her powers, is in this experimentation. And I think that is sort of also intertwined with the story of the earth, and how this thing that has these nurturing instincts gives back, is then abused, taken advantage of, and now she's retaliating against us. We have, like Jesus was saying, the wildfires, we have tsunamis bigger than we've ever seen before, because the earth just can't handle the way that we've treated her. And I think that is also just connected to womanhood and femininity, and how we abuse and mistreat women. And I'm sure we all have heard from our mothers, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. And I feel like that is what the earth is saying to us. And I also feel like I want to remove the person blame. Like, I feel like women often take responsibility for things that aren't theirs to deal with, and very much on an individual level, we all say, you know, don't use plastic straws, save the turtles. But it's not that straw that is causing our planet to die. It is men or corporations and these larger entities. And so that's sort of where my inspiration kicked off.
Yeah, no, thank you for that a lot. Definitely. I am just like literally so in awe of your piece, genuinely. And I do want to bring it back to you for a second. I think that what I admire so much about your piece in particular is how we talk about environmental racism, especially as such a newer term, and especially the academic sphere, and how it's not always the plants, it's not always biology, it's not always, you know, like nature in a sense. It can also be like the buildings that are around you, right? And the community that's around you, non-nature wise. And so can you just sort of speak to that and kind of how you've seen your relationship in defining climate change and environmentalism has shifted over the years?
So I think one of the like biggest examples of environmental racism that like I can think about is growing up on the south side of Chicago, and like we were lucky enough that we had like a Target that was so I grew up on 79th. I think we had a Target on 87th. And so Target was like the closest store that wasn't like a corner store or a liquor store, closest like store to my crib where we could go get groceries. And so we would get groceries at Target all the time. But Target was really like the closest thing to us. Like most of the time when we'd end up getting groceries, we'd have to go downtown to do it. And I think as a kid, I didn't really think too much about it because I was just like, oh, like we just going to the grocery store, we're just going to get groceries, right? But I think when you grow up and you realize that like, I should not have to go this far to get groceries. Nobody should be having to, and that's intentional. That's thought out. It's like environmental racism is literally like the intentional targeting of pollution and then lack of resources to specifically communities of color and low-income communities. And the idea of that is like so sinister, and it is a human idea. And it's ridiculous that when we talk about it, people try to think about it as just like a natural thing that just happens and there's no like structure for it. But there are so many structures that we have that uphold environmental racism and support it. And when we gotta think about dismantling these structures, and I think that starts first of all, I think with people's minds, and like not only educating people, especially the people who are suffering from it the worst, and educating them and giving them the resources to advocate for themselves, but also people being in these rooms who can advocate for them. And I think like those are the ways to combat it and to fight it. But like, you know, I think Micah, you brought up like the lead in the water, and like, you know, I remember I think it was this summer, and my mama told me about that, and she was like, yeah, don't drink this hot water, we're not even gonna risk nothing. Like she was like, I'm gonna get a filter, we're gonna be good. And I was like, okay, bet. And that's just what we're gonna do. But then also to be thinking about the severity that has of like, dang, I can't even, what a risk it is to just drink the water out of my tap, to drink the water straight up that's most accessible to me. What a risk it is. And just these simple things that we need to prosper and to live as people that are manipulated to make certain people suffer for reasons that are just simply hateful.
Thank you so much for that, Now. That was a really brilliant articulation. And it has me thinking, there's the geologist named Catherine Youssef, who's the author of a work called A Billion Black Anthropocenes or None. And what she states is that, similar to what you've said, right, that the solution begins in the mind. What she notes is that there's an interesting paradigm between the way that we treat the earth and ecological resources and the way that major white industrial capitalism treats Black and brown bodies. And this notion that things that come from the earth are a resource to be used and abused for the purpose of economy, and that this directly translates to the treatment of Black and brown bodies within that same economy. And even when we think about it, like what a fossil fuel is, it's a dead body that has then become a commodity to be pumped into to create fuel to make somebody money. And what Yusuf says is that it's the same philosophy that we can use the dead body of creatures in the earth before us to make us money, that encourages the abuse of Black and brown people to make money for us. And I wanted to pivot to Micah specifically as a scientist and ask if you also have noticed perhaps some of the particularities of environmental racism that might go over some of our heads as people who don't always think about the world in like scientific terms. Because I think sometimes sometimes we sort of throw environmental racism as a word at people and we're like, oh, what do you mean? These two things aren't really going together. But there's a science to it, and there's a paradigm to it. And I think you articulated it so beautifully in your piece, and I wanted to know if there were other things perhaps you noticed that folks don't always catch on to in the particularities of what goes into like the science of an environmental racism.
Well, unfortunate as it is, in my classes, environmental racism is like not something we've touched on, which I'm not surprised by, because it's just like at PWI schools, like why they're just gonna teach you what the textbook says, which is just like the basics of just like of science, and not like how it affects things socially, at least where I'm at right now. But I remember like I took physics in high school, and I remember in like the first or the last week of high school, my physics professor, he didn't talk about environmental racism, but kind of just like how we're trying to find solutions to climate change and how we're hurting the environment. And I just remember him saying, many people have these ideas of solutions, like either solar energy or wind power or this or that. But he was like, the thing is that everything comes with a cost. So let's say we all start using wind energy and we put windmills wherever we can put windmills. Okay, so now all of those windmills are using the wind, but what about where that wind was going and how it's going to, getting rid of that wind is going to impact something. It could be negative, it could be positive, we don't know. What about if you put up solar panels and then the solar panels are covering something? How is that going to impact what the solar panels are covering? Where is that? How is that lack of sunlight going? Like how is that going to affect things? And that was really just something that I had not thought about before. And one thing that I'm also doing like a research paper on, actually not in a science class, but in one of my English courses, is a research project on the increased temperature of redlined neighborhoods. And I feel like that is just like something that I had no clue, that just like how minute of a thing could just like make this ginormous impact. Because of course, like redlining was a terrible thing that just I don't think like the governmental institutions that created redlining knew all of the repercussions that it would have. Like they were just thinking, okay, white people, we want you to go over here, stay away from these Black people. These are dangerous neighborhoods that are not good. But the thing is when that happened, there are way less trees implanted because you have, like government housing, and they're cutting down all this like foliage, any kind of green, and then there's way more cement. And then you have things like lack of air conditioning, where now these red line neighborhoods are like 5 to 13 degrees hotter than neighborhoods that weren't redlined. And the thing is like no one would think about that. Like, okay, who and they're called like heat islands, and it's like no one would ever think that because neighborhoods were redlined and they have less trees than other places and lack of resources, that their actual environment changes in such like a monumental way. Like how in the same city could someplace be 5 degrees hotter than the neighborhood next to them? Like that is so wild. And then it just like leads to death literally because of these increased temperatures. People are dying and or suffering, and you just wouldn't think about how many people die from increased temperatures. So a lot of like people like they just think like environment, bad things happening, we're all affected the same. That's just really not true. And then the way that such small changes take place that have such monumental results would just blow your mind because no one is really thinking like, okay, if this wind is moved to a couple degrees of this direction, that's not going to affect anything. But the thing is that it really, really is. But the thing is what we're not going to know until it actually happens. So we just really have to be cognizant of like how the things that we're trying to do now with solutions, how are they going to affect people? Because no matter what happens, if there's a negative thing that happens, it's always going to affect people of color disproportionately. So I just feel like, I mean, my knowledge of the science behind all this is very much limited. Hopefully in the future I will know more. But just learning about that small fact about the temperatures of redline neighborhoods is just making me wonder, like, I wonder what just numerous things are also negatively impacted by such like things that we would have never known.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. You're so brilliant. Please don't apologize for that. That was I had no idea about these heat islands. And I had also didn't have the mind to think of solutions with that scientific mind of like this is also going to have a consequence. And when it does, as it always does, it will begin with Black and Brown people. So thank you so much. That's given me a lot to think about, and I really appreciate your response.
I'd like to pose a question to all of our artists. Art is an important tool in our social movement. In many social movements, is that what place do you see art having an effort to protect the planet? I know it was touched on a little bit, but what responsibility do you feel like when speaking on either environment in the environment or just other issues regarding protecting yourself and your communities and just like anyone that we see in our future?
I think that when it comes to the arts, it's going to be very important that we talk about things that need to be changed or fixed. Um, because, especially with poetry, it is one of the most accessible forms, I think, of literature that's out there. Because I feel like poetry is written for, for the everyday person. It's written for the masses. Um, I think Amanda Gordon said that, who comes when like the dictators take over a country or like are throwing over the country, who they go after first? They go after the arts. They go after the books. They throw them out. They burn them because why? Because it holds power. It holds weight. They're afraid of it. These are things that people pick up and see and think about and ponder. If they don't have access to it, then there's no way of rebelling. There's no way of putting up question to why is this way? Why is this that way? So when it comes to the arts and especially literature and poetry, being able to bring a message across, being able to speak on something that will get people thinking, get people, seeing things in a different light and different perspective is going to be really crucial into how things start moving towards in a different direction. Um, I know people might think, especially with poetry, like, oh, like, like that's not for me. That's some like old white guy talking about year and yonder. Like, no, I feel like, they need to present it in a different way in schools so people could see like, hey, that's not it. Like poetry is just a conversation, could be a conversation between me and you. And allowing that to be that way and presenting it that way and having people knowing it that way will really have them, you know, open up more towards poetry and arts of any kind and see it as not just being something that is just abstract and afloat. There's meaning behind it. There's people who put things into their art that actually speaks volumes and asks for change and questions and, you know, wants to push the boundaries of why and why is this and why is that. Um, and with art, the littlest of voices can be heard. And the thing about the littlest of voices and the weak, there is no strong anything. There's no strong government. There's no strong people, strong leaders without their being weak. Because without their being weak in the first place, they have nothing to be controlled of to begin with. So the weak have the stronger upper hand of anything else when it comes to that relationship between strong and weak. Because if there is no weak, the strong don't even exist at all in any playing field. So I feel like that is one of the ways in which, you know, we as everyday people, we as, artists can really change things. Because once the whole mass as a whole shifts to a certain side, people have to start giving in. They have to, or else they will not be able to go on or further with whatever endeavors that they want to take on.
I wanna piggyback off Jesus. I think that dichotomy of strong versus weak and like survival of the fittest is really interesting because like I've never seen artists as weak. I've never seen Black people as weak. I've never seen us as weak, and that's one of my things about like the term minority is like there is nothing minor about us. There wasn't never nothing minor about us ever. It was white people who wanted to make themselves feel better and created structures that then caused harm and like perpetuated the perception through violence that we were weaker. But we never were, and we aren't, and we not right now. And I think that like all of us doing this are a living embodiment of that. And that we can take that harm and turn it into something healing, and we can turn it into something heroic. And like that's one of the things about art that is so beautiful is that like art can liberate and it can also educate. And I think that both of those things, especially when it comes to climate change, because I think like it's not a thing that's probably talked about enough. But art can open up that conversation and can do it in a way that touches people's heart, that like once they hear a poem or they hear a speech or they watch a film, they can like consume that and it can stick with them, and then they can move throughout their day and throughout their communities with more passion and with more intention and with more knowledge, so that they can work on creating that change for themselves where they are. And I think that is what's so like potent about and essential about art in this moment, and what it's been in every moment, and what it's going to continue to be, and why artists are so valuable. Like just all of us doing this right now, like y'all are so valuable.
Niall is consistently coming through with grace and intelligent in all spaces, always. You're brilliant as always. Kyla, I would also love to hear your response to this, because you do this incredible thing with your work where you make a poem about a cartoon character to discuss these things. So it's not just art, but it's expresses. So we're using art, to talk about environment. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. So I would love to hear your thoughts about the role of the artist in relationship to the environment.
Yeah, I think with poetry in particular as an art form, it is one of the most accessible in the digital age, especially because you aren't going to find a video dissecting a book, yes, but you're not going to read the book in a video. You're not going to see a post of just an entire book. So poetry, I think, is easy to digest large concepts like climate change. And I think it's especially important to dress it up and to give it another layer to get people interested. So you have some catchy title like Poison Ivy's Got a Point, you're going to be like, okay, but about what? And then suddenly you are all of a sudden, down this rabbit hole of, oh man, I didn't consider climate change in this manner. And I think that is one of our greatest strengths in, as our generation moves into getting our thoughts and ideas put into larger actions, is that you can show somebody something online and suddenly they are learning, so much more. Like Micah's just told us about the heat islands, and everybody's going to go Google that, hopefully. And you're going to edit yourself further, and you are going to, go to a rally and a protest about it. So I think the art is important as a way.
I want to thank all of y'all for such an amazing conversation on how artists are interacting with the environment and how the environment's affecting people of color and so much more. I want to thank Niall, Micah, Kyla, Jesus, and the whole JVN team also. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I want to thank the Madison Arts Commission. To learn more about the JVN project, please follow us at the tag below at the jvnproject.org as well. To learn more about the Madison Arts Commission, you can go to their website, and the Winter is Alive website as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we hope to see you guys around more. So, goodbye. Thank you, everyone.